as everyone knows, we are doing things differently with agility. We're here every 4 weeks to try to establish the community around technology, agility, and product. And this is the team. I'm Christina, and I'm an agile coach at Adam Digital. And my motto is upskill, mentor, coach. It's all about delivering value. Here with me today is Mike and Mike, our Mike and Mike, actually. So if you guys want to present yourself, feel free.
Hey, I'm Michael, everybody. So I'm Agile trainer and digital. I'm noticing a few familiar LinkedIn faces here, so it's good to see you again. Looking forward to learning from our lovely guest today. My quote is, "A dead Scrum Master is a useless Scrum Master," because that's just something that's always stuck with me. So.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, I'm Mike Pullen. I'm a PA. I've been with Ant about 4.5 years, something like that. Product analyst, that is. So my little strapline there, walk through the fire and you'll fly through the smoke. Yeah, I've used that many a time, walked through lots of fire. So there we go. Christina.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this was us. As always, let's just agree, like we would like to establish a safe space to express our views, to have some discussions, and to engage fully. So just go for it, please. We provide constructive feedback, and we would like to receive constructive feedback. So feel free to send us a feedback. We'll have like sometime at the end. We're always looking for ways to improve ourselves and what we do. So yeah, all feedback is welcome. And as I already mentioned, the meetups will be recorded and they will be uploaded probably in the Ant YouTube channel, where people can find them and can watch them later if they're unable to join. Okay, and we move to our icebreaker. Mike, over to you.
Yes, over to me. I get the chance to share one of my favourite slides of all time with you. It's, look at that, the thing of beauty. So the icebreaker today is, does it say my speaking volume is a bit low? Can everybody else hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yeah, fine. Oh, okay. So in the next few seconds, go find something old and then come back and we'll just quickly tell everybody what it is or what it does. So away we go. A few seconds to go and find something old. Gets you out of your chair, on your feet, walking around the house. Possibly. David's not looking impressed.
You didn't mention anything specific, yeah?
I've already got something quite old in my hand, so I'm going with that.
All right, well.
I could go with myself, but I've actually got a thing.
Oh.
I'm in an office, so I can probably go and find something old here if you want me to. I'm not at home, still not at home, but
I think you'll struggle in Tenzing, yeah. It's only been there.
Yeah, it will be hard for new offices.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to start from people who are back? I suppose, like, just give us a thumbs up if you're back, guys, and if you're not on camera, just to understand that everyone's back. So
Yeah, okay. So I think it might be a good idea if everybody put a thumbs up, and then we'll know who's been and who's not, because whoever goes can choose the next one. Okay, we could do that.
That's great.
I'll go first. So something old, there we go. It's from my little collection of pet rocks. This is a part of the Berlin Wall. It was given to me by one of my wife's aunties, who bought it from she's German. She bought it from a school in Germany to contribute towards their school funds. So that's my old thing, a piece of the Berlin Wall. I'll hand over to Giovanni.
This is I don't know if you can see it. Oh, it's a Radiohead t-shirt It's about 20 years old from when I discovered Radiohead. It keeps me warm because I wear it as a pajama top.
I like it. Who are you going to pick next?
Oh, David, did you have something?
I do, and I hope this is okay because it's kind of out of hours, and I've had my dinner and stuff, so I pour myself a drink, and this is 15 years old, so I'll do it.
I love it, David. I love it.
I like your style.
All of it is 15 years old, yeah.
We
So.
accept it, yes. Great.
Just to be fair as well, although it's 6 p.m, I'm working a slightly different shift at the minute. I'm starting work at 6 a.m. in the morning, so this is later for me. My body clock is on like 10 p.m. or something. So
Yeah, right. Thumbs up. Who doesn't believe him?
Don't do that. It's recorded, okay? Everyone, like, hands down. Cool. David, do you want to nominate the next
Cool.
person?
I will. I'm going to nominate Andy. Is it Swearing? Swearing, is that what you say?
You did a good job.
Ah, cool. Go for it, Andy.
So this is my object. Calls me a computer expert. So this is got to be 20 plus years old. My mother bought this for me early in my IT career. She passed about 15 years ago, so it reminds me of her, and it keeps the papers on my desk from blowing away.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Are you really in St. Petersburg now?
Florida in the US.
Oh, okay. Nice. Amazing. We have people from all around the world. I love that. Angie, would you like to nominate someone?
Yes, I nominate my friend Michael.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, cool. So it actually took me a while because I recently moved from overseas and sold everything I own, and I was gonna show like my Nintendo Switch, which I thought might be the oldest thing I owned, but I remembered that I do have one thing that survived a very long time, and this is a picture of my best friend from when I was a kid. His name was Freddie. He was named after Freddie Mercury. So yeah, this is the one thing that I've had since I was very young. And I will nominate. I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong. Is it Toroko?
Hello, everybody. Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you after all of our communication. So I'm going to show this. This is a cassette tape, if you guys can see this. So way back when I used to have, I'm from the US as well. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I used to have a house, what's it called? An answering machine. And I had to put this in there to record my messages. I had the machine somewhere, I couldn't find it, but I saw the spare tape. So I've had this for quite a while, yeah. So I believe everybody on here knows what this is. My daughter, I have an 18-year-old. I'm sure if she sees this right now, she's probably gonna say, what the hell is that, Mom? But this is.
Wow, that's brilliant. Great. Communication still uses them. Choose somebody.
Yes. I just wanted to make a comment. So I recorded my first computer program on a cassette tape like that. So it was the Tandy Radio Shack. We called it the Trash 80, TRS 80. Sorry.
Thanks, Andy. Pick the next person, Toroko, please.
I'll pick. Has Giovanni gone?
Yes, he has.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes, I have.
Let me go with Marcelo.
Thank you.
Oh, hello everyone. I don't know if you can see me, but I have this. It's a lampstand. It's just something I found in the house, and I think it's very old because you can see the globe is not even here. So that's the oldest thing I can find here.
Nice one. Thank you. Choose who goes next, please.
I'm choosing, I don't know if David. Yeah, David.
Oh, I think David's been.
I've been.
David
I've
was
been.
with whiskey,
It's been
so
sorry,
Let
sorry,
me choose.
Joe. Joe must have, yeah, sorry for
That's-
pronouncing it there.
Hi,
hello.
is that working?
Yes.
I can't see my own video. Apologies. I've been running around because my dog just decided to find the mice poison
Oh
and chew it.
no.
So if I'm looking a little stressed, I am. But I have managed to jump back on board. It wasn't very much, so fingers crossed for the dog. And I have found this, which is a fire poker stick. Hopefully you can see.
It's very interesting, Joe. We can see because you have the background. So I think the background is just taking the.
My settings are not working. I can't take the background off, so apologies.
No worries, no worries. I saw that you
I'll take a
hold
picture.
something. Yes,
We'll-
perfect.
We'll edit that footage on the recording and put a lightsaber in your hand. I think that'd be quite good.
Yes.
It'd work quite nice.
Cool. Joe,
Thanks.
who would you like to nominate next? Sorry, Mike. I'm going on mute.
I'm afraid I have no idea who hasn't been yet. So, because I've been
Oh,
running around.
I can see Joe. Let's see who's not been yet. Martin.
Do you hear me well? Hi.
Yeah, it's fine.
Great. So I was also I could connect to Michael, but I was not able to find very old things in this flat. But I found this book. I got it. Now you don't see it, I guess. Now do you see?
Yeah.
I guess you know this one, and it's quite used, and it looks like old. And because I got it from my brother to actually exercise my English on it, because yeah, that was like 10 years ago or maybe a little bit earlier. It was fun to do, fun to read.
Oh, okay. I think there's just two people left, so let's whiz to Reza.
Hi everyone, first time you're on a meetup. Great to see you all. Okay, what I've got is this bit of a small rock stone all the way from a mountain of Iran.
Oh, nice one.
Yeah,
Another person with
I
the
don't know how old
connection.
it is, but I'm guessing it's maybe a billion, couple of billion, I don't know, years old.
It's definitely older than the Radiohead T-shirt.
Yeah, I think you're winning at the moment with the oldest artifact of the day. Thank you. Roxanne, last but by no means least.
Yeah, sure. Oh, I should put my camera on. Bear with me. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm new to Meetup and saw this, so I thought I'd join. And not very original. I just looked around as to what I have on my desk and in my drawers, and I actually found a box of paracetamol that is dated back for 2018.
Oh, wow.
So I won't be using them, but they've been stashed in my desk for that long.
Wow.
Just looking if I have older paracetamol, but it's not as old as yours. I've got some cold tablets as well.
Oh, you just ruined the icebreaker for next time, which was the oldest paracetamol in the house.
In the house, yeah. Don't take it if
Roxanne.
it's that old, please.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'll hand you back to Christina.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. It was good for everyone to share. And because I didn't share anything, actually, I will show you. I was just thinking. Mike, you said like something old, and old is like in a semicolons. Well, I can show you that's my diary for 2022, you know, and we're almost towards the end. So it's kind of old now, like I'm almost like here at the end. So it depends what's your definition of old, right? I mean, considering everything else that people showed, like mine is quite new, but like, again, it depends what's your measure. I suppose.
I'm an analyst. I'm an analyst, Christina, so I should be defining old, really, shouldn't I?
It's good to put definitions, right?
Exactly. I've broken the first rule of requirements there, haven't I? But never mind.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, thank you very much for doing this. So hopefully we have, just before I go to the next slide, hopefully we just get to know each other a little bit more. We saw each other. So we are going to see what we are going to do today. First talk, we have Giovanni with us, and he will be speaking about splitting stories with SPIDRO. Then we'll have a short break where people can socialize if you want to socialize and stay on the call. If you need the break, you feel free to go for a break. And then we'll have Ben Maynard, who will join us a little bit later, and he will be speaking about large-scale Scrum, myth busting. Ben is an expert of less, so it will be very, very interesting to see what he can tell us. And then towards the end, we'll have some time for feedback, and we'll discuss the next meetup and obviously like what you guys want to see on our next meetups, because as I said at the beginning, we would like to establish the community. And as we would like to establish the community, we would like to listen to what people want to see on these meetups so that they're useful for everyone. So that's definitely something that we would like to do. And heading over to Giovanni.
Yeah, there you go. Excellent. Right, I'm going to hit share screen and then see what happens.
I just stopped sharing, so you will be able to.
Share, and everybody disappears.
Yeah, but we can see your screen.
I'm just going to put the faces on over there so I can still see them. And you can see a big blue hello and welcome, I take it.
Yes.
Fab, it works. Okay, hello and welcome to Splitting Stories with SPIDRO. This is the Spider-inspired talk as we're still close to Halloween. And my name is Giovanni. I am a Scrum Master. I work for And Digital, as a few of us here. And I'll get started. We will be covering a very quick introduction, then what is SPIDRO, a quick idea, a quick joke about, winning the lottery. Then I'll go through the SPIDRO because it is an acronym. A very quick mention of keeping things simple and light. There's space for questions at the end, but if you want to ask me something, please do interrupt. That's not a problem. And I usually run this with Scrum teams, so then I say any stories, but I don't know if anybody will have any right now. Oh, this is my reminder to hit record, but I think we're recording. Grand. So very quickly, getting started. Why should we split stories anyway? Why not just let them run over sprints and not worry about it? It's good to have small deliverable chunks and short feedback loops. You might remember from the Scrum guide, Scrum is a lightweight framework that helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. How do you make the solution adaptive? You give it a real feedback loop. And short feedback loops, I know from experience, they work a lot better than 2 or 3 year feedback loops. So keep the feedback loops as short as possible and make real change as you go. Small stories are easier to estimate, which makes your planning more reliable. And then there's the issue of the horizon. I don't know if anybody here has run a marathon or done a long cycle. Towards the end, you'll be knackered, but then you see the finish sign and you just get that bit of energy to finish. When you can't see the horizon or the end point for the work you're doing, you do have less motivation and momentum. That's one of the reasons why a sprint should be no longer than a month. So you can think, okay, I'm going to finish this at that day. And here's an example, a developer who can't see the horizon because it's over the end, it's over the other side of the world, just to give a in that situation, you'd probably think the work's never going to end, so you lose a bit of motivation. And what is SPIDRO? SPIDRO is based on the SPIDRO model by Mike Cohen and Mountain Goat Software. There will be some links at the end with references to the original material. It's a set of practical ideas to help split stories into sizable chunks that fit into a sprint. A very quick reality check. Some stories just will not sprint. They are large by nature, and that's a reality of software development. These are rare, and I'm not going to talk about these now. We're going to talk about stories that can be split. Most common stories, large stories, are compound stories, essentially made of different components which can be split out. And it is spikes, paths, interfaces, data, rules, and outcomes. That's what SPIDRO stands for. But before we start, here's the £50,000 you've won on your scratch card. And you want to buy a sports car, something for the weekend. This isn't your daily car. It's something that you want to drive for fun. And it's about the pleasure of driving and reconnecting yourself with the pleasure of driving. You have a budget of £50,000, and I have a list here of requirements. Have a look at those and ask yourself, which of these would you expect to be part of the package for a £50,000 sports car? Any of these nice to haves? Any of these not bothered? If you want to share, put some in the chat. Put in the chat the ones that you really would consider must-haves for a £50,000 sports car, and we will. I like that. Not sure what a limited slip diff is. We will come back to that later. And we start with the S, which stands for spikes. How was my pace, by the way? Because I tend to just go a bit too fast when left to my own devices. If I'm going too fast, or if you have questions, just please do interrupt. Now, sometimes teams do not have enough knowledge to estimate a story or finish a story in one sprint. A spike is a piece of work to enable the team to gain knowledge around a story. It's a term for a research activity. And the term is a metaphor for a rock climber stopping to hammer a spike into the rock, so to use as a foothold. Now, a story may be large because of new technology, because of multiple possible solutions. Pick one and spike it. And what that means is pick one and just do a very quick experiment. Do a quick MVP and demo it, or rather review it with your stakeholders and your customers. And with a spike, you can pull out some learning, research, or small experiments. And the output of a spike could be a number of new stories, throwaway code that can be built upon when implementing the original or new stories. And it's worth mentioning, do try the other approaches first. While the spike is the first letter of the acronym, try the other approaches first and then come on to spike at the end. One last thing, spikes should be time boxed. That is basically to avoid going down a rabbit hole and spending, 2 months learning about databases. Consider a spike an experiment, and with an end time, certainly within a sprint, something that you could be able to demo, if not code a wireframe. And I've repeated that in bold because, I've had to say that a few times to people. And there's the illustration of a climber putting a spike into a rock. That's where the name comes from. Going to move on to the next one, which is paths. P is for paths. A story may be large because there are different paths a user can take through the story. Any multiple paths become an opportunity to split a story out. And so you identify the paths a user can take and split them out into individual stories. So, for example, if click and collect, as in this example, is particularly complicated, take that out and do it in the next step. You can also to pull out a step within a single path. In this example, you're being asked to enter the delivery address, but to make it simpler, you could just grab the same address as the billing address. And you don't need to split stories into the finest possible details, just enough to fit the rest into the sprint and then carry on. And it's worth remembering flowcharts and wireframes are your friend, because they just visualize how the customer journey, and they just expose different paths if they're there. Got an example. One of my favorite examples of taking out steps is the happy path.
Giovanni,
Imagine
just
users.
1 second, sorry. Just for everyone that joined a little bit later, you haven't missed a lot. I'm sorry to stop you, Giovanni. So we've done the icebreaker, and now Giovanni is presenting us how to split story with SPIDRO. And we're not even that much into the, like forward into the presentation, because we were just on P, on the letter P. So yeah, please just feel free to catch up. Sorry, Giovanni. Please go on.
No, that's okay. And just to go through those again, the S was for spikes, and the P is for paths. And oh yes, I'm still on paths. And it's recorded, so you can go back to the recording and see that again. I'm going to talk about the happy path, which is where we imagine that users make no mistakes and there's no need for assurance. And a story could include building the user interface to include any validations, such as a valid postcode, as well as services needed for address lookup. This could be split into two paths. One deals with the happy path, where the user puts a valid postcode and address is found. And the second deals with error scenarios, such as when a customer enters an invalid postcode or the service cannot be found. And what this does, whilst potentially you might not be able to use it to release it to the customer, you can release as far as user acceptance testing or feature flagged, and you have a story that you can review with your stakeholders to get feedback. And another example is background checks. And right. Going to move on to I for interfaces. A user story may be able to be accessed from different interfaces. So consider a story that you would access as a PC user, as an Android user, Apple device, online user, and in particular, IE user, which I believe has just been decommissioned and is the tough one. It's the one that everybody hates because it's so old. And these are definitely candidates for splitting stories. And there's a lot of, I see a lot of websites that just say this works best in Chrome. And they just don't give full support for IE anymore. And although that then becomes something that you may add in later. And moving on to D for data. And here's a story which basically processes data for the user, hence the bit in the middle that just says CRUD. And data comes in different shapes and sizes from different formats. So you can look at subsets of data. So here we got a case with oil, gas, wind, and solar. So if we just look at oil, different formats of data, Excel, CSV, XML, let's just say we'll start with Excel, and different outputs. And there you have a very simple story that delivers some functionality to the customer. And again, you don't have to take everything out of the story, just split out as much as necessary so that you can finish in one sprint. And there's an example of a slightly larger story, or something you could add in a sprint too. One of my favorites is rules. Some user stories are large because of multiple rules and multiple acceptance criteria, like this one. And here we have a customer selected a home delivery, look up an address so I can make a purchase 10 seconds faster. The acceptance criteria: postcode should be recognized with or without a space. Spaces at the beginning or the end should be ignored. A customer should be informed if they have entered an invalid postcode. As the user enters a postcode, postcode suggestions should be displayed pretty quickly. As more of a postcode is typed, suggestions should update, and the user should be able to click on a suggestion and select it. So what we can split out things like business rules, industry standards, non-functional rules, and so on. And again, this enables you to release as far as UAT or feature flagged off, or actually sometimes to the customer. And you have a story where you can get some feedback on. Oh, I've got a hand.
Yes, I have a question. Are the questions at the end, or I can ask it now?
Please crack on, ask one now if you want.
So what you will recommend, like when you're splitting down the stories, and obviously stories with such a big acceptance criteria, because that's happening very often, are you recommending like putting the same user story with the different acceptance criteria in different tickets, or how you recommend to split down the ticket?
I would do that. I would actually have a second and a third ticket. The reason being, you know, purely because you use Jira and you want to get that flow of tickets, or even post-its, get that flow of tickets, and decide which of the acceptance criteria really gives you the most value. So basically do a prioritization exercise on the acceptance criteria. Which are the ones that A, give us something that we can show our stakeholders, even if we don't release it to the customer. B, can we release it to the customer in the, you know, and then C, what are the things like, let me go back a bit. Like this one, within 100 milliseconds, you could potentially release to the customer if you haven't quite got the speed down to 100 milliseconds, and then do that in a next iteration. But with regards to tickets, I would actually use different post-its or different tickets and resize them accordingly. And that gives you that quick feedback loop.
Yeah, and I think that's actually proves why it's so important to split down tickets on a, you know, on the right sizing, to get the tickets to the right sizing. Because if you have like a ticket with such a big acceptance criteria, if not all of the acceptance criteria is kind of satisfied, we cannot really move the tickets to done, right?
Indeed. Indeed. And somebody might say, oh, you can't release this, haven't got all the acceptance criteria. And then you say, well, if we take some of the acceptance criteria out, we can release it flagged off. I don't know if you're familiar with the flagging of features, but we have something we can show our stakeholders. And then they can say, actually, release that, you know, because the, you know, the delay or the spaces, you know, can be fixed later.
Yep,
I'm talking again about the postcode example.
Thanks, Giovanni.
No, thank you. I've got a real life example here. This is me buying tickets because a friend of mine was in this show, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And here's an example. What you can see is me selecting a ticket in between two other seats. And I will get an error message saying that I can't leave single seats on their own. I can't leave a single seat remaining on its own. Another one is here, I'm trying to buy 10 tickets and it won't let me because it will think I'm a ticket tout. And so this happened to me recently. I was booking tickets to the Book of Mormon and I couldn't book more than 9 tickets. Both of these are rules that can be added. You can release, you can release a booking system and then release these rules as you go. And the second one I know is a reaction to people buying 20, 30, 50 tickets because 5 or 10 years ago that was not a common rule, that you had a maximum number of tickets that you could buy. Going to move on to outcomes now. Now, thinking about the outcome of a story can help split it into components. The obvious thing is to look at, does the story have more than one output or outcome? Obviously, that's something that's easy to split apart. And then, more fundamentally, what value does the story provide and to whom. This is more a shift in way of thinking than an actual technique. And then ask yourself, what's the simplest version of the story that can provide value? Start with that. And quoting the Scrum Guide again, a product is a vehicle to deliver value, and a story is basically a nugget of value for a feature, and it should do one thing and it should do it well. So here's as an example, a Kick-A-Man bottle or the Wordle game. It does one thing, and I forget how many millions of dollars the Times bought that game out for. It was news a few months back. And a story should begin from a value proposition. If you don't know what the story does and for whom, in terms of value, it's probably not written very well. And that sounds harsh. And so I'm including here value to the customer, value to the business, and value to the developer journey. Fixing technical debt has value. Because somebody wants to ask me, and you know, so I want to specify, you know, fixing technical debt and making your delivery pipeline more streamlined or your code more robust obviously has value. I'm not going to go into why that is, but you know, because that's another talk really. And also stories should not be solutionized. Any questions at this stage? I'm going to carry on because this relates to the question I asked at the beginning. And here we have a car. It's a sports car for the weekend. It's the Ariel Atom. It's about 40 to 50,000 pounds. This car has no doors, no windows, no roof, and no sound system. The seats are made from a single plastic mold. Comfortable seats are an option. Turbo is an option. Limited slip differential is an option. ABS is not available. This car was in production for 8 years before a windscreen was actually made available as an option. And this is a perfect example of that shift in perspective, where every component of this car is as simple and as lightweight as possible, but retaining the quality and the focus on the value to the customer. And here's a statement from their website. The essence of the Atom is a no compromise, total driver involvement, and the bottom line is seriously good fun. This car has a waiting list, I'm aware, of 6 months to a year if you want to buy one. But you know what this car makes me think of, and I'm going to end with this quote, is simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. And here are the references. Do we share the slides at the end, or should I copy and paste these in the notes? I'll do it. I'll see if I can do a copy and paste.
If you copy and paste them after that will be brilliant. It's fine.
Here we go.
Do we have any questions for Giovanni?
Wish me luck. Okay. No, I'll try copying and paste afterwards. Yeah. There we go. Questions. I've actually included a picture of a 1979 Walkman. If you look closely, you'll see 2 volume knobs. The reason there are 2 volume knobs, it was stereo, but instead of putting in a balance circuit, they had a separate volume control for left and right. So they saved themselves a whole little piece of electronics. I've got a hand up, and it is Panos.
Hello. What we struggle sometimes is that we realize too late that we need to split the story. We think we know enough, then we kind of like right before we start the sprint, we have like a final check, and we're like, yeah, we know what this is about. And then we start, and the first day we realize, oh, we have to split this because this is too big, which then affects velocity, what we promised, blah, blah, blah. So my question is, at what life cycle do you recommend to do the splitting? And how do you deal with the sizing of the items, if that makes sense, to avoid that from happening?
Well, that's a really good question. I'd go as far as planning. And if it's day 1 or 2 of the sprint, it would be worth just checking with your product owner and say, because, you know, I don't know if you're aware of the invest model. stories are negotiable, say to the product owner, can we split this out, and would it still meet the sprint goal if we did? And that can be, say it's got too many acceptance criteria, you would go to the product owner and say, look, if we take out this particular acceptance criteria, which is really complicated, do you think we'd still hit the sprint goal? And once you're in the sprint, you'll take the lead from the product owner, I suppose, and then you say, well, because if we don't, it will overrun. And if we split it down, we'll have something that we can demo to our stakeholders, even if it's not releasable. Don't know if anyone else has an opinion on that, because that is a really good question. What would anyone else do?
I was just going to offer some thoughts on that as well. So being a Scrum trainer, I do a lot of talking about, you know, pedantic interpretation of the Scrum guide. So this is a topic that actually comes up quite a lot. One of the things that's often challenging for Scrum teams in organizations where there are real world pressures outside of just perfect Scrum is this idea of the the sprint goal being the commitment, which the Scrum guide is very, very specific about. And Giovanni, you alluded to it there, but I think it's really worth just kind of taking a moment to think about, because Panos, you mentioned, you know, you don't want to harm velocity or our commitment, but actually our commitment is in Scrum is not to delivering individual stories, right? It's to achieving a sprint goal. And so I think that really is the question that a team should ask is, can we deliver a smaller version of something that still achieves the sprint goal? And as long as it still achieves the sprint goal, hopefully our customers, you know, appreciate the value of fully delivering something they can see in a sprint review versus an unfinished, more complex thing. So that's definitely something that I would just say is really worth keeping in mind.
Yes, thank you.
Think about nuggets of value. It's a slightly smaller nugget, but still valuable. Sorry, Panos, were you saying something there?
No, that makes total sense. My question was coming from to exactly Michael's point. We're a agile newbies team, and our product owner isn't very experienced, so we're finding our feet. So these things come up a lot because you're like, oh, you promised me all these stories going to be done, and based on our velocity in the previous sprint, you know, why do we have to adjust now? What do I have to tell my superiors, whatever? And I'm kind of like feel I'm stuck in the middle sometimes to deal with that situation. So yeah, that makes absolute sense. Thank you.
Am I allowed to share my opinion on holding people down to velocity?
Yeah, do it. Do it.
You know,
we have another question, just to say. We have another question.
But 20 years ago, before we were being asked, how many lines of code are you written? Now we're being asked, what's your velocity? And I'll say, stop asking that. Start asking, what value does this deliver to the customer? What value does it deliver to the business? You know, how does it change our customer's life? How does it generate value? Velocity has been misinterpreted and misconstrued massively. I won't say any more on the matter.
We can have a whole separate session about it, right?
Yeah. Taroko.
Yeah, I agree. That's a whole separate session. I have so much to say about that. But back to the story split. So one of the things you mentioned was that sometimes you have stories that are big that are really cannot be split. So in the situation where you're working with a team that you don't really know the product yourself. So if they come up like my team, like even the person who spoke before me, sorry, I forgot your name, is a newbie team and all of that. There's a Salesforce team. Personally, I don't know Salesforce, but some of the stories we're working on, I can tell are really big. And they say they just can't be split. You know, it's difficult for me to challenge that concept because I don't know Salesforce. So I can't really argue, but I believe there's something in me that makes me feel, I believe that it can be split. How do you handle that kind of situation? How do you prove to someone that you can split this when you really don't know the product itself to be able to push for that to happen?
You just keep on asking the questions. And I know that sounds pedantic, but say, oh, you know, what does this look like? Can we storyboard this? By storyboard is, you know, make a wireframe or a customer journey, because then you'll. Let me go back a few. If you ask them for a customer journey or a wireframe, you may well end up with something like this. And if someone tells you that can't be split, you can say, well, are you sure? Or even, on the customer journey side, there you go. If you've got something like this, click and collect or home delivery. If you ask just, oh, what does it look like in a flow chart or a wireframe? And once you get that visual representation, you can say, well, let's talk to the product owner. Is a click and collect a massive deal breaker? Can we take it out? I'm using examples from my own, from the presentation, but wireframes and customer paths, customer journeys are your friend. Often though, it'll be, they've got a really clear picture in the back of their head, or you know, but by putting it on paper or in pictorial formats, it just, stuff just surfaces. And I hope that helps. But just keep on asking the questions.
Yes.
And one trick is, if you see a really long list of acceptance criteria, that's kind of a giveaway. And it's worth going back to the PO, the product owner, saying, okay, if each of these acceptance criteria were prioritized, which ones can we do in the next sprint?
Just to say, thank you very much for that. Thanks for the questions. Giovanni, I'm very sorry, we will need to move on.
I was going to say, how are we doing for time?
Yes, if you would like to, if you have more questions and if you would like to actually send them to Giovanni or to any of us, I would say we'll take a quick break now. And during the break, if you guys want, share your LinkedIn in the chat so we can connect. And if there are a lot of questions which are similar, we can just create some kind of group, or even in the Meetup group, and like we can just ask some questions and provide some answers. Because we are completely aware that the time is not enough. So we are here for the second part. I hope the break was enough. I know that it was quick, but we are going to have our second talk. I'm very, very excited to present you Ben. Ben just joined us. Hi, Ben.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Ben, would you like to present yourself and to tell us what you will speak about today?
Yeah.
Although we've done like a quick introduction at the beginning of your talk.
Yeah, I missed that. Sorry. Children.
Of course.
Damn things. Could you enable screen sharing for me, please, Christina?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Ben Maynard. I know a few people on here, and I recognise a few names. So it's nice to put some faces to some names. I'm a trainer, coach, I suppose, part-time consultant, and I said I'm probably most commonly known for my activity in the large-scale Scrum community, for what it's worth. So I'm the UK's only certified large-scale Scrum trainer and certified coach. So I thought, why not just do a little bit of less myth busting today? It was a toss-up between this and another talk, and I thought I'd go for this because I haven't done it for a while. So if at any point you have questions or you want to challenge anything, then please, feel free. I don't mind to be interrupted. I know I haven't got a huge amount of time, so I'm not going to kind of dilly-dally around with it too much. I'll just crack on if that's all right, unless anybody's got any particular requests. I once sung I Can't Live If Living Is Without You, the Mariah Carey version, on a sprint review, because I was challenged by, I put on a challenge to the team and they succeeded. So I had to sing that. So I'm glad no one's asked for that. You can all see my screen with a goldfish. Super, right. So less large scale Scrum. There's a few myths about it that I've encountered over the years. So I thought I'd start with a slightly tangential, just to say that I think people love a catchy fact that sounds plausible. But when we fact check it, then we find that, when we don't fact check it, that's the problem. People come out with stuff. And particularly, I think in the Agile community, people are very good at coming out with stuff. But we never fact check it, and we don't, and the mistruths will lead us astray. And I think less is one of the best known examples of this in the Agile world. So a few myths that we've all heard over the time is that bulls are enraged by the color red. When actually they're red-green colorblind, so they're not really enraged. They're probably just really pissed off because someone's standing in front of them waving something at them. I mean, I know that annoys me. Goldfish only have a 3-second memory. Not true. Some have shown it can be up to 3 months. So a little bit of a difference there. But I mean, it's better to say, isn't it, that goldfish have only got 3-second memory, or balls are enraged by red. It's much catchier. Right, makes you more friends. So we talk about less, and we talk about myths in particular. I think one of the biggest myths around less is around the idea of feature teams. And I kind of lost count of a number of times when people come and they come on training and they'll say, well, yeah, feature teams only work on one type of feature, or they just work on a technical component, or that they think there's some difference between what Marty Kagan calls product teams and feature teams. And all of that is kind of incorrect. Now, first and foremost, feature teams, I think they came about from Microsoft early on, and people can correct me on that. And then they were really, most of the work on the definition of feature teams was done by 2 gentlemen called Craig Larman and Bas Vodder. And they released something many, many years ago called the Feature Team Primer, which was really popular. And Craig and Bas went on to then create large-scale Scrum. So they baked feature teams into the very heart of it. And feature teams are teams that can, hypothetically at least, they're designed so that they can learn. First and foremost, they're designed so that they can learn. And Scrum, as far as I'm concerned, I don't think Scrum's a framework or an approach designed to make great products. I think that's kind of I think that's one of the least useful terms we can use to describe it. I think Scrum is a great approach for helping to make great teams. Those teams can make great products with the right direction and the right support and the right environment, but it's about making great teams. When you look at Scrum, that's what it's all about. And feature teams, for me, are the very pinnacle of what we can achieve, because they are close to the customer, they've got the skills they need, and most importantly, they learn, and they learn so that they can work on different features over time, and they can pick up the skills necessary. And if they haven't got the skills they need to do it, then there's various techniques they can do to acquire those if it suits. So for me, myth number 1, that feature teams are there to work on a singular feature, and that's it. When they're not. Feature teams are there to learn, to be close to the customer. Myth number 2, and this is a particular bugbear of mine, that technical excellence isn't really that important. I think sometimes people will often come onto on an agile training course, and the last thing people want to talk about is technical excellence. But it doesn't matter what domain you're in, being technically excellent in the product you are creating is really important. And your adaptability as an organization, your agility, your nimbleness as an organization is severely limited by your ability to quickly, safely, and repetitively change your product. And technical excellence in the software domain is one of the key things we have to really focus on that. And people think that less isn't about that. Less is just Scrum, right? And it's so much more than that, because less does, in my opinion, more than many other frameworks in really pushing what are some great technical practices. Now, not that it prescribes these, not at all, but it really heavily recommends them. And I've got a little story. It's not a very attractive set of slides, so I apologize, but a little story about what happens when you don't really focus on technical excellence. So let's say we have a lack of automated tests. Okay, and I'm not talking about unit tests, right? I'm talking about functional feature-based automation, not unit tests. We should always have unit tests. We have a pressure on teams which is increasing and corners being cut, and we have a lack of automation and build and deploy. Now, what happens is when we don't focus on technical excellence and we don't focus on automated testing and specification by example, when the pressure of the teams increases, so corners are getting cut, we end up with high defects. When we get high defects, we have a fear of releasing. Okay, so situations where we have a low degree of real focus on technical excellence and a good quality of software product, it increases the fear of releasing. When we have a lack of automation of build and deploy, that also increases the fear of releasing. Yeah, and this fear of releasing is what leads organizations to decrease the frequency at which they release. I never forget when I was at Royal Bank of Scotland, and some people here may remember me telling the story when I was there, but there was a CIO who was really disturbed by the number of defects coming out of the releases. So he asked for his team, his senior leadership team, to reduce the number of defects. So we just reduced the number of releases. So the number of defects went down, but when they did actually then get around to a release, it was hell. So the release frequency goes down, the planning horizon goes up. right? And because we're planning on a longer horizon, the plans are harder to stick to. With the plans being harder to stick to, that's not bad enough, but with the release frequency going down, this is when queuing theory, lean thinking, Kanban come in, because it increases work in progress. As that work in process increases, the pressure on the teams increases, the cost of each release increases, and because releases are getting more expensive, the desire to stick to the plan increases. So we're in this horrible systemic effect, this chain of events, because we're not focused on technical excellence. We're planning bigger batch releases that cost more. And because they are bigger and the cost of those releases and potentially the value of those releases increases, the desire to stick to the plan increases. So as things start going wrong, the pressure increases on the team. Plans are just fabricant anyway. They don't make any sense. You can't predict that far ahead. So the deadline's going to get missed. So it just increases the pressure on the teams even more. And so more and more corners get cut. We make plans to fix up the technical debt, but they all get put to one side. And it just leads us back round in a circle. There's been lots of stuff, and a good friend of mine, Jem, has been putting some stuff on LinkedIn recently about the need for Scrum Masters to be technical. And I wouldn't say Scrum Masters need to be technical, but I think having an appreciation for what happens when we don't focus on technical excellence, right, is really important for anyone working in a software delivery organization. And less puts it at the very heart. So if anyone says to you less isn't about technical excellence, then they kind of got the wrong end of a stick. Now, another element, and particularly around large-scale Scrum, I think, because it doesn't suggest any measurement. Often, if you look on the LESS website, you won't find much in there which talks about measurement. But the fact to say that nothing gets measured in LESS is incorrect. Because in LESS, like, measurement is kind of at the key, kind of at the heart of a lot of it. But in LESS, we don't look to measure for certainty. We're not looking to measure something so that we are absolutely certain something is true, because it's a fool's errand. If we think that we want to have certainty through measurement, then we're going to end up spending more money than it's worth to measure. So unless we actually take a very different point of view, where we look to measure to reduce the uncertainty. So we look to understand what decision do we need to make. And if we then agree that we need to make a decision, if we need to improve something, change something, then we will absolutely decide what we need to measure to decrease our uncertainty enough so that we can act. And if we don't know what the decision is, we won't start measuring. Now, with LESS, one of the LESS principles is lean thinking. And with lean thinking comes great things like cycle time and lead time. It's a big fan of, one of the principles is systems thinking. So systems thinking, we want to be looking for defects. And we want to look at the systemic effect of those. So we do measure stuff. We just don't explicitly state it because it's different in every situation. So we'll always look to measure outcome over output, which is obviously the predictable thing to say. I mean, if who doesn't give a talk at some point where they say, oh, it's all about outcome over output, but like, it's true and it's important. In LESS, I've always found it's really important to see how engaged people is, how they are in their work. Are they happy? Are they engaged? It's hard to measure. But you have to question sometimes, is it ever worth it? Because it isn't worth it if you're measuring how engaged people are, but when you choose to do nothing about it. The best head of engineering CIOs I've ever known were the people that would effectively tour the world around the time of the employee engagement survey and speak to each location to find out actually, why have you responded in this way? And really solve problems with them. We talk about the value of releases, and of course people will always talk about measuring value, but kind of what is that? You know, value isn't something that's released. I think it's absolute. I mean, one of the biggest myths that is pervasive in the agile community, not from all but from some, is that when we're measuring like cycle time or we're measuring time to value, we measure the time till it's released. But that's utter nonsense if you want to measure value. I mean, what's that old classic statistic from the British Computer Society? So 60, 70% of features or functions aren't ever used. Well, what's the point in measuring time to deliver features that are never used? What we want to measure is our hypotheses. We believe that this feature will be valuable because it will be used in certain ways. And then once it's out and it's being used in those ways, then we can stop the clock. But our perspective on measuring for value or the time it takes to release value is wrong. It isn't when it's released. It has to go further than that. And do we want to look at the speed at which features flow? I think, yeah, you can string that for this one, but I think that going fast is important. I think that if you're in a startup and you've got competition and you're trying to challenge an incumbent, the speed at which you can reach feature parity with that incumbent is incredibly important. Your funding depends upon that. So you've got to be quick. And everyone says, oh, it isn't about speed. It absolutely is about speed. It's about a lot of other things as well, but you can't deny, but for many, it's about speed. Okay, myth number 4. So when we talk about large-scale Scrum, one of the things that it is really absolutely steadfast on is that teams have to talk to users. Right? The one thing which less is steadfast on is that the product owners do not deal with clarification. Product owners deal with setting direction. And the fact that I think that we have interpreted that, or in some avenues, it's been interpreted that the product owner is a role designed to sit between the users and the customers, users and the teams, to do the refinement work, to do the analysis, I think is kind of crazy. Because why would the authors of the Agile Manifesto, when it says business people and developers work together on a daily basis, then create a framework to put someone in between them? Why would they do that? Like the product owner acting as a go-between is something that we've created because we've never really appreciated the benefit of good analytical skills in a Scrum team, in a software development team. And because we want to maintain the status quo, it's easier to give people a job title of a product owner and get them doing the refinement work. And so unless people say, oh, but you can't talk to the customers and users, but you can. There's normally a way. If your users are internal, so if it's internal product development, then your users are going to be your colleagues. Right? Maybe that one's quite easy to see. If you're looking at project development, then what we recommend in less is that actually the product owner is effectively like a lead user. So if a company's coming to you saying deliver this product, we will have the product owner / lead user in the client site, and then we are the outsourcer who are delivering it to them. And if we are in product development, and this is where it gets a bit more funky, right? So if you're working in a mass market, how do you then begin to communicate with your customers? And this is where a lot of the challenge comes up. When people say, work in a mass market, we've got tens, hundreds of thousands of users, millions of users, right? How are we going to talk to them? And this is where less provides some reasonably solid guidance. It will say that in product development, if it's innovation-centric, standards-driven, when there aren't real users, then that's where your product managers, your product team come in. If it is a mass market, then you use product managers, marketeers, team members. You don't have to go to the user. We want to get as close to them as possible. Less gives lots and lots of guidance around that. But it also then begs the question that if you're putting teams in front of the users, then how do we get teams really acting like they should do in an agile environment? I think the previous talk was there, come up with some great tips. And if you haven't read it, I'd really recommend reading the MOM test. I can't say MOM. If anyone can do an American accent, please everybody come off mute and say MOM or mental block on it. It's a great, thank you, test. It's a brilliant book. And what it says in this book, and it has nothing to do with agile, it says the user or customer brings a problem. So if you think about user stories, the standard as I want to say that, the I want part of a user story is for the team to decide. It's for the team to come up with a technical solution. It's for the user to come forward and say, I want to be able to do this differently. I've got this problem that needs to be solved. And it's down to that software development team, that feature team, to dig down deep and understand it. And it's down to then us as a feature team, collection of feature teams a product owner, to really then work on creating a solution and testing that solution. And going back to measurement, if you want something which really puts the cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to measurement and you're using Scrum, suggest that you measure the percentage of product backlog items that are demoed by the user, not the team, in the sprint review. Because if the users are willing to use the feature in the sprint review, then that shows that they've been engaged all along the way. It shows that they've accepted it. The acceptance criteria is met. The team are focused on getting them trained up. The team are focused on making sure they got what they need. So for me, that's one of my favorite measures. The percentage of product backlog items measured by, percentage of product backlog items used by the user in the sprint review, not the team. Okay, and how are we doing for time? Okay, myth number 5. We're nearly there.
We're doing pretty good with time, don't worry.
Yeah, good. Well, I need to go and order a takeaway for me and my wife after this, so I can't have it for too long. Big trouble. So myth number 5. When people look at less and think, oh, less is just Scrum. It's fine. We've used Scrum. We don't need to change our organization. And what we end up with is what we would commonly refer to as fake Scrum. So picture the scene. We've got an organization and we've got 8 teams. And these 8 teams are being given the job of making this lovely box, kind of like something you'd get on a, I don't know, like a Spectrum from the 1980s, if anyone is old enough to remember the Spectrum 48K. They're looking to make this little box, and they've got these different lines, they're different styles of lines, different colors, different lengths. And our teams are already set up in a certain way. We've got teams that are very technically specialized. And so what we'll do is this project comes in and we're going to use Scrum, right? It's a new big thing. We've been sold it. And so we give each of the teams their own specialist line to build. So they've all got their own specialism. Great. At this point, we've lost all foresight. We've lost all sight of actually the end product. And what we've created is a need to then integrate this all together at some point. Now, because we're using Scrum, each team gets a Scrum Master, of course. Why wouldn't they? Scrum says the Scrum team is Scrum Master, Product Owner, and team, developers. So let's give everyone a Product Owner, let's give everyone a Scrum Master. So instantly, this is costing us much more than before, probably. We have to hire some new people, Scrum Masters aren't cheap. And then these teams go about doing their thing. Each of these Product Owners is prioritizing based upon whoever shouts the loudest, perhaps. Perhaps they're prioritizing on some other thing, but because now each of them has their own complete autonomy to prioritize it however they like and accept work from elsewhere, perhaps, you know, the boss is going to be wondering what's going on. So we're going to keep our project management office because they need to find a way to coordinate and synchronize and bring all this together, make sure it all gets integrated in the end. And the team can't test it. Well, they surely can test their little pieces, but they can't test the whole thing. So we're going to need a test team, and that test team are going to use Scrum. And then we're going to separate architecture and design because we can't trust the teams to do it because one, they're specialists in a certain area. And secondly, they've got no oversight of it. How can they be expected to understand the whole thing? And then we've got loads of other dependent teams and all the stuff that comes with it. And this approach to using Scrum, what we would call copy and paste or fake Scrum, is a complete misunderstanding of what Scrum is really supposed to historically all be about. What we're seeing here is multiple teams, each using Scrum, lots and lots of Scrum teams. But what we have in less is lots of teams using Scrum. So Less Huge, which is the bigger framework in Less, has been used with thousands of people across many, many geographic locations. You know, I've used this at Royal Bank of Scotland, Deutsche Bank. I've used it in startups and used it in other companies. I've Experian, who I'm no longer NDA'd for. You know, they're a Less house. Aha Slides, if you've heard of Aha Slides, they're a great Mentimeter alternative. They're using it. And what it boils down to with this is that we minimize product ownership. So even though we have 20, 30 teams, we'll have this bare minimum product owners that we can get away with. Each of the teams, they work on whole features, not those technical components, and they all work on collections of requirements that are meaningful as a collection, as a theme. Because we're all using Scrum, lots of Scrum teams with different sprint lengths and different prioritization, we're all using Scrum. We all work on the same sprint. We all work on the same cadence. We all share a definition of done. So when it gets to the end of a sprint, a lot of the effort to coordinate and synchronize just isn't there because it's all coming together into a singular place. So when I was at World Bank of Scotland and we started using Scrum, and we were with 5 teams and everyone had their own sprint lengths on different days, it was an absolute nightmare. And we were like that close to getting a project manager until someone said to us, well, you're not actually using Scrum. Why isn't everyone working the same sprint? And then so all the problems we had around coordination and synchronization disappeared. And we had a much higher order of problem to solve. So by using less and less use, it gets rid of a lot of the conceptual dependencies. I can't complete my feature of this part of the feature because I'm waiting on someone else to do another part of the feature. But less doesn't get rid of all dependencies. And for a long time, myself included, the less community has been guilty of saying that less is not there to manage dependencies, it's there to eradicate them, which just isn't the case. So we want to get rid of dependencies which inhibit a team from having a meaningful conversation with a user or customer. We change the structure, we build the relationships and work on the cultures so that teams can really talk to the users and customers. We want to get rid of those dependencies. So we're not going to have one customer that is working across 3 different areas, working with 6 different teams. We want our one customer, one user to work with a collection of teams that they know and build a relationship with. And we want to get rid of all dependencies and get in the way of that. The dependencies between teams and other functions, but you know what I mean? There's always going to be dependencies between HR or legal or marketing or potentially sales. And the way we like to deal with that in less is the role of the product owner is there to build and maintain those relationships. Is there to make sure the right things are on the backlog. So how the product owner wants to deal with those dependencies is up to them. But we have a role dedicated to making sure that relationships are there and that these other functions aren't not being looked after. Excuse the negative. We want to get rid of dependencies which inhibit the flow of work to the customer or user's hands. So basically anything where we've got people working on different, well, it depends. We want to minimize the number of branches, for example. Branches are just silos. The longer a branch exists in our code base, the longer, the more risk we have of merging that code back in. If we have people working with different build mechanisms, different ways of testing, then all of this gets in the way and it inhibits our flow, our technical excellence and our flow to the customer or user's hands. So less really focuses hard on getting rid of those dependencies. Now, one of the less trainers said to me a little while ago that DevOps was created because no one focused on technical excellence. I'll paraphrase him. And there's to see the truth there. You know, you look at quotes from Jez Humble years ago. You know, he was saying that DevOps was created as something to kind of help people be more agile. The fact it's now become a separate industry and a separate function is kind of ironic. And I'm not dissing the DevOps world at all. I think there's some awesome stuff they do, unless we just find ways to bring all that together and get everyone working more in a more conducive manner to getting stuff out quickly. And those kind of dependencies we can deal with. The dependencies that we absolutely cannot get away from, and it is foolhardy to think we can, are technical dependencies. Right? We have 10, I don't know, 2, 5, 10, 100, however many teams all working on the same software product, all sharing a code base. Right? Then there's always going to be technical dependencies. We're never going to get rid of them. We can delay the pain of having to work together by working in silos or getting people working on separate components. But at some point, it all has to come back together. So unless we embrace technical dependencies, we know they're going to exist. And what we do is we give the power to actually figure out how to resolve these technical dependencies to the teams. We build great teams with great technical experts, with a huge degree of technical excellence, with a huge amount of experience. We give them the opportunity to find decentralized and creative ways to resolve their technical dependencies. Less is a framework for creating great teams. It's a framework for having great conversations. And so much of the events on Less differ from what you find in Scrum because they're optimized for having multiple teams work together and talk and have real conversations and solve the gnarly technical problems, not outsourcing it to another a senior person. You know, more software deliveries, more product delivery goes wrong because management and leadership make a decision based upon an incorrect understanding of what's actually happening, I think, for all other causes combined. So unless we look to give as much of this power down to the teams. Now, I'm guessing that some of this sounds sensible, at least bits of it. I'm not sure if it sounds easy. Like less doesn't make this easy, but it gives you a better chance. It makes the right things transparent, it makes the right things painful, and it gives you a whole heap of tools to deal with it. So I'm hoping either it sounds sensible or it sounds easy, right? But busting those myths in the real world, it takes focus, courage, and then to increase chances of success, find someone who's failed before. And there's plenty of us out there. So that was a whistle-stop tool. I'm that black and white person there. Here's some links and things. I'll make the deck available. If you did want to, I'll put a link on in a second. And if you did want to subscribe to my mailing list or come on one of our courses or whatever you like, and it'll be lovely to see you. Or just subscribe to the YouTube channel. Come on my podcast. I'm always looking for guests. Michael, thought provoker, right?
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to have a chat with you.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you a question as well, actually. So part of this, just forgive my ignorance. So I've been in New Zealand for a long time, and for whatever reason, less just isn't a big thing that side of the world. So I've never really actually had to learn that much about it. But from the limited discussion that you've given us there, it sounds an awful lot like Nexus, at least at the high level. If it's not too much in the weeds, could you maybe give me a little bit of a highlight of the key differences you think that separate Less from Nexus?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing that Less doesn't do is condone any kind of integration team. You know, Less is a bit simpler in that respect. There are a lot of parallels between it, though. We have to appreciate that Ken Schwaber worked with Craig and Boz at Nokia, I think, when he was defining Scrum. So Craig and Boz were on the initial raft of Scrum trainers. They were recruited on the Friends of Ken scheme, I think, as it was called back then. So they kind of defined it all together. So there are a lot of similarities. I think one of the major differences, and my knowledge of Nexus is a little bit rusty, but Nexus has that integration team, whereas Less is a bit more hardcore on saying no, that's not. You may have an integration team, but that's a stopgap to get somewhere else. And I think that's probably one of the major differences.
Cool, thanks.
Are there any other questions for Ben?
Dinner time.
I don't think so on that occasion, but Ben, thank you very much for sharing with us these links. Again, for everyone, you can just connect with Ben on LinkedIn, or just message him in there if you have any questions later on. Yeah. And before we finish, Ben, thank you very much for this. This was absolutely amazing. I would like to share my screen for one final time tonight. So just give me 1 second to see where is my screen that I would like to present. Oh, here we go. I hope it works. And again, it doesn't work that good. We still haven't fixed this. So basically, when I say feedback, when I click the slideshow, it just removes the QR code. I don't know why, so I'll just leave it like that so you guys can scan. We just created a QR code. Please scan it. That's for the feedback. Please feel free to leave us a feedback. As I said at the beginning, we would like to improve. We're all about that 1% improvement. So if you have any suggestions or any feedback, please feel free to share. And also, I would like to mention our next session, which will be on 1st of December, and it will be Scrum in Action. We prepare Scrum Santa and Saving Christmas workshop. And this workshop actually came from a request from the feedback forum. So for everyone who is quite new to Scrum, and for those of you who are not quite new to Scrum, you can all join us, and we'll just do like a workshop helping Santa to save Christmas. We'll need to do some activities, basically using the Scrum events. I won't reveal a lot more, but the meetup is already on the meetup page. So if you would like to join us, just subscribe And yeah, I will see you on 1st of December, if that's the case. And just to say, yeah, thank you very much. That's been from myself, Mike and Mike, as I said at the beginning. It's very interesting dynamic in our team with 2 mics.